The darkness did not fall in a single brutal moment. It was a tide, creeping into the corridors of the Jedi Temple and the hearts of its guardians. The Clone Wars had become a meat grinder, and the Jedi, once beacons of peace, were now generals whose brilliant lightsabers painted targets on their chests for every sniper and artillery droid on the battlefield. The catalyst was the Battle of Megiddo. It was there that the cost of their luminosity became untenable. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, his great cone-shaped head a clear mark, led a valiant charge across a crystalline plain. His blue lightsaber was a rallying point, a symbol of hope for the clone troopers. It was also a perfect aiming reticle, a single, hyper-accurate shot from a separatist vibro cannon, fired from miles away, did not target the Jedi Master but the ground where his shining blue blade met the earth. The resulting crystalline explosion killed dozens of clones and left Mundi severely wounded, his legendary prowess useless against an enemy he never saw. When the report reached the High Council, the silence was heavier than any Durasteel blast door. Mace Windu, his hands clenched, finally gave voice to the grim truth they had all been avoiding. "We are fighting a new kind of war," he stated, his voice low and resonant with anger. "Our traditions, our symbols, they are being used against us. We carry beacons while fighting in the shadows. We are making ourselves relics on a battlefield that demands ghosts." It was Master Shak Ti, often a voice of serene compassion, who surprised them all. She had just returned from overseeing the cloning operation on Kamino, where the sheer impersonal scale of the war's machinery had chilled her to the bone. "Mace is right," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The Force is our guide, but our methods are from a bygone age. We speak of the living Force, yet we march to our deaths in a formation it cannot recognize. There were ancient sects of Jedi, the Sentinels, the Shadows, who understood that to guard the light, one must sometimes walk in darkness. Not the darkness of the Sith, but the stillness of the void, the anonymity of the protector who is felt, not seen." The proposal was radical. A contingent of Jedi would voluntarily undergo a profound ritual to alter the nature of their lightsabers. This was not the Sith practice of bleeding a crystal with rage and pain. It was a discipline of absolute focus, a meditation on the essence of protection through sacrifice. A Jedi would take their kyber crystal and through days of intense concentration, pour into it not a color reflective of their personality, but the very concept of the void, the silent, absorbing emptiness that exists to shield the light from harm. It was an act of self-erasure for the greater good. The crystal would not scream in agony. It would fall silent. It would cease to emit a specific frequency of light, instead becoming a blade of pure, light-absorbing blackness, outlined by a thin, stark white corona. It was named the Void Blade. The first to successfully forge one was Mace Windu himself. His mastery of Vapad, the form that channeled inner darkness into a weapon of light, made him uniquely suited. In the council chamber, he ignited the blade. The familiar purple fire did not appear. Instead, a shard of absolute night erupted from the hilt. The air around it seemed to grow cold and still. The hum was a deep, subsonic thrum that was felt in the bones more than heard with the ears. It was not a weapon that inspired hope. It was one that promised an end. "By the Force," Obi-Wan Kenobi whispered, a rare look of shock on his face. He saw not a tool of the Jedi, but something primal and terrifying. Yoda, his large eyes narrowed, studied the blade. "A grave path this is," he murmured. "Walk it. Only those who are certain should. A shield it may be, but a shadow on the soul it can also cast." Not all Jedi adopted it. Obi-Wan, the consummate defender, believed his blue blade's visibility was a crucial part of his role as a rallying point and a symbol of unwavering resolve. Anakin Skywalker, however, was immediately drawn to it. For Anakin, the Void Blade was the ultimate tool of efficiency. On the battlefield, it was a game changer. In the rain-lashed streets of Seluakami, his black blade was a blur of nothingness, impossible for droid photoreceptors to track. He moved like a phantom, his presence announced only by the deflected bolts that struck his attackers down. He found a cold, detached focus with the blade that his blue lightsaber had never demanded. It silenced the noise of his own emotions, forcing him into a state of pure, predatory awareness. It worried Obi-Wan, who saw his brother becoming more machine than man with each passing day. The Council decided the Void Blades would be reserved for specific high-risk operations, deep infiltration, covert strikes against Separatist leadership, and the protection of the Jedi Temple itself. A secret cadre of Jedi, including Masters Windu, Tai, and several high-ranking Jedi Knights, mastered the technique. When the fateful day came, the implementation of Order 66 was met with a resistance the Sith Lord had not anticipated. The Jedi were not the brightly lit, predictable targets of his design. On the bridge of his Venator, Plo Koon flew not as a Jedi Master and a distinctive starfighter, but as a phantom. A moment before the betrayal, a cold dread had washed over him through the Force. He activated his Void Blade, the cockpit of his fighter now illuminated by an unnatural shard of darkness. When the clone pilots in their ARC-170s swung in behind him, they lost their visual lock. The iconic green blade they were trained to target was gone. Their shots went wide, and Plo Koon, the wise and gentle master, became a ghost, diving his ship into the gaseous maw of a nearby nebula and vanishing. On Felucia, Aayla Secura did not die in a hail of blaster fire from her trusted troops. Her blue blade, a comforting presence, was now a scythe of black. As the clones turned, they found not the familiar Twi'lek Jedi, but a shifting silhouette that merged with the colossal, shadowed fungi. She moved through the jungle as a myth, striking from the darkness and melting away before a coordinated volley could be organized. The clones, trained to fire at the glow of a lightsaber, were disoriented and confused, firing at shadows and echoes. The most significant divergence occurred in the Jedi Temple. When the 501st Legion marched into the Grand Hall, they did not find a scene of chaotic, illuminated defiance. They found a tomb. The temple's lights were dead. The only illumination came from the clones' helmet lamps and the sporadic flash of blaster fire. The Jedi did not make a grand, heroic last stand. They executed a tactical, terrifying defense. Black blades ignited from behind statues, from dark archways, from the shadows of the high ceiling. They were not dueling. They were ambushing. A blade would appear, deflect a volley of bolts back into the advancing troopers with chilling efficiency, and then vanish back into the darkness. The clones, their advanced training useless against an enemy they could not see, began to fire wildly, their disciplined formations breaking down into panicked chaos. This shadow war in the temple bought priceless time. With the 501st bogged down in a disorienting and brutal close-quarters fight, more younglings and scholars, guided by masters like Jocasta Nu, were able to escape through secret passages into the Coruscant underworld. The survival rate of the Jedi was not a victory, but it was a mitigation of the genocide. The Void Blades had not been weapons of triumph. They had been tools of survival, allowing the Jedi to break contact and vanish into the galaxy's forgotten corners. In the ensuing years, the legend of the Jedi Phantoms and their Blades of Nothing became a whispered myth, a spark of hope in a dark time. The Empire's Inquisitors, tasked with hunting the survivors, found themselves pursuing phantoms. They were not hunting radiant knights of legend, but shadows who wielded a darkness that was not of the Sith, a solemn, silent vow of protection that had learned the ultimate defensive tactic, to hide its light so that it might never be fully extinguished. The Jedi Order had been forced to cloak itself in an artificial night, and in doing so had ensured that the dawn, however distant, would one day come.